Good morning, everybody. So this morning we have two lectures. The first lecture will be about Romaniotes. So the question is, everybody obviously knows to what the term Romaniotes refers. What does it refer to? You say Roman.
Jews in the Holy Roman Empire.
Jews in the entire Holy Roman. No.
Eastern
Roman. Not necessarily.
From the Roman, they moved to the Eastern Roman Empire.
The Eastern Roman Empire, it's written. Yes. To Eastern Roman Empire. Of course, it was all Roman Empire. And then in Greece before that, to the best of my knowledge, not really. You mean in Greece of, well, in Hellenic world, like in Alexandria and that kind of stuff, certainly. But were there any Jews in Greece before the destruction of the temple? Yes, certainly. Yeah, well, when St. Paul went all over, right, in each of those cities he found a synagogue, and he preached first to the Jews. So obviously there was a huge Jewish dispersion in the Greco-Roman world. So why do we, okay, so the term actually can be applied to entire Roman Empire. Mostly in research we apply it to the Jews of the Eastern Roman Empire. And then the question is, why do we call them Romaniotes? Why don't we call them Byzantine Jews?
What is the Byzantine period?
We'll get to there is a slide of that. Okay, so here I'm trying to explain the thing. You will see. The Romaniote Jews, or Romaniotes, are a Jewish community with distinctive cultural features and who have lived in the territory of Greece and neighboring areas for more than 2,000 years, right? So look at this. The Byzantine Empire, okay, that's the way we call it, but it's not the proper name. Nobody in the Byzantine Empire called the empire Byzantine Empire, right? The word was totally unknown to them. And if you would ask any Byzantine, with quotation marks, citizen, how does he feel as a Byzantine, he wouldn't even know what you are talking about. So how all of this came about? Well, I'll return to this. First, I want to show you something. This is the Roman Empire, right? And then during the time of Diocletianus, exactly, it's split into two. So what you see here in green is the Eastern Roman Empire, and what you see in red is Western Roman Empire. Now they actually established at the time of Diocletianus, they actually established tetrarchy, which means there were two emperators, one in Constantinople and another in Rome, and then each of them had a vice king. So basically 4 people were ruling the entire empire. 2 people were ruling its eastern part, and 2 people were ruling its western part. Diocletianus himself preferred staying in the eastern part. And the reasons are obvious. The western part was constantly attacked by barbarians, right? By all kinds of Germanic tribes. While at the east, at the moment, the life was much easier. Now, those who were with us on the previous tour to the Balkans will understand certainly why I underlined the word split in the split of the Roman Empire. Why would I do that? Exactly, because Diocletian, who actually split the country or the empire into 2, he lived in Split in Croatia. And those who were there with us, right, remember that this is the peristyle, this is the entrance to Diocletian's palace, and this is on the left side, it is Diocletian's mausoleum, and today the cathedral of Split. Okay, so I'm going beat back, right? you can see, and this is actually, some people asked, I'm just jumping, but some people asked about Yugoslavian war. And they said, well, if these people understand each other, the Serbs on this side and the Croatians on that side, why they fought? Well, the border between the Eastern Empire and Western Empire was there, and this is the border between Latin and Greek world. This is the border between Catholic Christianity and Orthodox Christianity. So this is the border between civilizations. So basically the last Yugoslav war was religious war fought by atheists. Right? Most of the people on both sides don't believe in Orthodoxy or in Catholicism, but they were ready to kill and die for them. Okay. So, let's go a bit back. This is not back, this is further. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going a bit back. Right? These are the reasons behind, and you see here how the country was split.
So what period of time was that?
You can see. Exactly. So it's 3rd century. Now what happens? So why do we call this Eastern Empire Byzantine? Well, the reason is very political. It has to do with the fact that the first researchers of this were Germans. And Germans were extremely interested in Holy German Roman Reich to be the exclusive, solitary inheritant of the Roman Empire. Therefore, they needed to reject, neglect, undermine, and make everybody forget about the Eastern Roman Empire. Because what happened? Western Roman Empire fell under the barbarians very soon. And Eastern Roman Empire proceeded functioning for additional 1,000 years until the fall of Constantinople. So if there was a heir in the world of the Roman Empire, this was the Eastern Roman Empire. But you remember that Charlemagne, right? Charles the Great. Yeah. So he was coronized, I believe there is such a word in English, by the Pope as the Emperor of the Holy, re-established, resurrected Holy Roman Empire. And then basically, you can see, the Holy Roman Empire, Sacrum Romanum Imperium. In German it was called Heiliges Römisches Reich. Römisches Reich. Heilige, holy. Yeah. Okay. So you can see here, the precise term Holy Roman Empire was not used until the 13th century, but the concept of translatio imperii, transaction of the imperium, was fundamental to the prestige of the emperor. The notion that he held supreme power, inherited from the emperors of Rome. The office of Holy Roman Emperor was traditionally elective, although frequently controlled by dynasties. The German prince-electors, the highest-ranking noblemen of the empire, usually elected one of their peers as king of the Romans, as he would later be crowned emperor by the Pope. The tradition of papal coronations was discontinued in the 16th century. The empire never achieved the extent of political unification formed in France, evolving instead into a decentralized, limited elective monarchy composed of hundreds of subunits, principalities, duchies, counties, free imperial cities and other domains. The power of the emperor was limited, and while the various princes, lords and kings of the entire empire were vassals and subjects who owed the emperor their allegiance, they also possessed an extent of privileges. In a decree following the 1512, the name was changed to Holy Roman Empire of the German nation. Heiliges Römisches Reich Deutscher Nation. Right? A form first used in a document in 1474. The new title was adopted partly because the empire had lost most of its Italian and Burgundian territories by the late 15th century. But also to emphasize the new importance of the German imperial estates in ruling the empire due to the imperial reform, right? So basically, when Hitler was speaking about his 1000-jährige Reich, he was actually speaking of the new German Reich. Why new German Reich? What happened to the old one? And when something happened to the old one? It was actually abolished by Bismarck, right? So the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation claimed to be the solitary and only heir of the Roman Empire. And this is exactly why they needed to undermine the other part of the Roman Empire, which had continuity. Because you can see here there was a discontinuity of few centuries until the barbarians who destroyed the Western Roman Empire decided to re-establish it now as more or less Germanic. Okay, so what did they do? At least they could have called this empire Constantinopolis. But then the project of undermining wouldn't be entire, wouldn't be complete. Because everybody knows that Constantinopolis is named after Constantine, and then the Roman heritage would be immediately recognized. So they call it Byzantium. Byzant is a name of a village, next to which Constantine built Constantinopolis. So this is freaking me out. I mean, imagine now that I'm extremely pro-Russian, that I'm a Putinist, and that I hate America. So I want to undermine it. So I don't call it United States of America. I don't even call it New York. I call it Manhattan Empire. This is injustice that was done to the Eastern Roman Empire, right? It was reduced to a place totally insignificant, which was the place next to which the capital of the empire was. Now imagine this. Jewish researchers, who were also Jews, they, just like everybody else, they swallowed the general term for the empire. But they never applied it to the Jews. So the Jews of the Byzantine Empire are called Romaniotes because they are Jews of the Eastern Roman Empire. They are not called Byzantine Jews. You follow? So it's interesting. Christian German scholars established the name Byzantium for the Eastern Roman Empire. Everybody in the world accepts it. Today, even in Greece, you have all kinds of centers and institutes and departments at different universities teaching Byzantiology. So Byzantion never existed, but the field of science that deals with the Eastern Empire is called Byzantiology. Okay. However, though, in Jewish studies, the term was never applied to the Jews. So mostly, we don't call them Byzantine Jews. We call them Romaniotes. Why? Because the official name of the Western Empire was Roma, right? Republica Romana. And then, being the fact that in the eastern part of the empire, everybody spoke Greek, or Greek was the formal language, the name of the empire, of the Eastern Empire, was Rhomania. Because in Greek, Roma, you say Rhomania. And this is the reason why, when Turks conquered the Eastern Roman Empire, they called that part Urumeli, Rumeli, or Rumelia, the land of the Romans, the land of the Eastern Romans, right? And then this is, for example, you know, everybody knows the famous Sufi writer called Jalaluddin Rumi, right? The guy who established the whirling dervishes. So, where is he from? From Konya. What was the original name of Konya? Iconia. Icon. It's a very Eastern Roman name, right? And then, being the fact that he's from there, from Asia Minor, he is called Rumi, Roman. Okay? Everybody follows up by now? Okay. Now we can switch to what happened slowly but surely. So this is the split of the empire. Okay. These are different districts of the empire. And then you can see what actually started happening to the empire gradually. Oh, with the establishment of Constantinopolis, the Bikephalos, the double-headed eagle was invented, with one head looking to Rome, western head looking to Rome, and eastern head looking to Constantinople, the new Rome, the Nea Roma, right? Okay, then you will see that all those countries in the Balkans who claim any kind of connection to Eastern Roman tradition will have the same double-headed eagle in their, how do you call it, state emblem. So this is Serbia, this is Serbia again, this is Montenegro, right? And then the Byzantine movement in Greece also has the same bikephalos. Okay. Now you can see here what happened with the western part. It was attacked, for example, this is Iberia. This is Iberia Romana, right? This is the basically Roman Spain. And you can see how it was attacked by Vandali. Vandalized. The country was vandalized by the Vandals, a Germanic tribe, right? And how do we call this part of Spain today?
Andalusia.
Andalusia. Why? Because of the Vandals, exactly. So it was Vandalusia, country of the Vandals. And then the Catalonia, which is over here. It was attacked by the Goths. Catalonia meaning the land of the Goths. Cata, Goto, Gotolonia. Okay? So you can see here what actually happened and how entire Western Empire was divided between different Germanic tribes. Okay? And you can see that most of them are Germanic, because here you see Frankish, Franks, right? Alemannic, Ostrogothic, Burgundian, and so on. So it's all Germanic tribes. At the same time, at the same time, Eastern Empire was thriving, and then Eastern Empire, at certain point, attacked back the barbarians. So they restored Roman rule over big part of the West, and all of this was ruled from Constantinople in the middle of the 6th century. Okay, then you can see how big the empire was at the time of Justinianus, right? So basically all these parts were added by Justinianus. But Justinianus was the emperor of Eastern Empire. Middle of the 6th century. Okay. Now wars and frontiers.
Can you return the other one?
If I can, I can. Yeah, here it is. By the way, the entire PowerPoint presentation is already on the Dropbox that belongs to the group, so you can have it from there, so you don't have to be... okay. Now, what happens is invasion from all attacks. Now, the Eastern Roman Empire is attacked. So you have Persia, right? And then Lombards, and the Slavs, and the Avars, and the Bulgars. And why Bulgars are not together with the Slavs? Because today they are a Slavic language speaking nation, but originally they were Tatars, which came together with the Slavs to Eastern Roman Empire. Okay, so you can see consequences of constant warfare. The empire was huge; it was fighting on all the fronts, right? And Latin language was lost in the East totally. And then the rise of the power, which will take it almost 1,000 years, but it will destroy the Byzantine Empire and take it all together. Anatolia was also part of Byzantine Empire, right? All those cities which today have Turkish names: Istanbul, Constantinople, Izmir, Smyrna, Edirne. No, Edirne is already in Romania, in Balkans. But all these names were preceded by Greek, Byzantine, Eastern Roman names. So Turks first established themselves in Anatolia, in Asia Minor, and then later they took over the Rumelia, right? The Balkan part of the Eastern Roman Empire. So you can see how Arab Caliphate took the entire Middle East and Asia Minor. Okay, and then Byzantine Empire was basically reduced to this here. And all of this is only introduction. So you can see in beginning of the 9th century, the empire, the once mighty and huge empire, is reduced to this thing here. But still, Sardinia and Sicilia belong to the east. And that's why if you go there today, you will find Eastern Roman churches. Okay. This is some kind of administrative division of the empire. And this is the Turks' Seljuk Sultanate, which before the Ottomans, which was established in the southern part of Asia Minor. And then gradually, it will take over the entire Asia Minor, and then it will move to the Balkans, and then it will move to Hungary, and then at a certain point it will get to the gates of Vienna. Okay, so here you see in how Seljuk Turks advanced, and you can see already Slavic countries established on the other side. Now it's interesting, on this side, Byzantine Empire actually felt that it can use Christianity to subdue in certain way those peoples and to absorb them into Eastern Roman Orthodox Christian culture. So all these people were converted by the Eastern Romans. On purpose, I'm not using the term Byzantines, right? And basically, to a certain extent, they were a vassal to Constantinople, to a certain extent. Okay, now this is the story of Thessaloniki, right? This is only introduction to our next lecture, so that's why I put it here. And here you can see, what do you see here? Serbian alphabet. And what do you see here? Bulgarian alphabet. And what do you see here? Russian alphabet. And what do you see in all of them?
Greek letters.
For what?
For, I don't know.
The sum of the letters.
Greek signs for all those phonemes which are, for all those voices, for all those phonemes which are identical in both languages. So, Greek has A, Serbian, Bulgarian, Russian have A, so A is A. Greek has B, right? Or Greek has V, and so on. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta, right. Now, one letter Slavic languages did have, and Greek alphabet didn't offer a sign for. It was what? Sh. The Greeks even today have major problem pronouncing sh, because it doesn't exist in the language. So either they say j, either they say ch, either they say many things, anything but sh, right?
Like syphilis, shibboleth?
So,
Shin from Hebrew.
Shin was taken from Hebrew. So you can see in Serbian alphabet, you can see the Hebrew Shin. In Bulgarian alphabet, you can see the Hebrew Shin. In Russian alphabet, you can see the Hebrew Shin. Right? Okay, this alphabet was invented by two Salonicans, considered today by both big Christian churches, and it was by Orthodox and Catholic Church, to be saints. So their names are Saint Methodius and Saint Kyrillus. And after Kyrillus, the Cyrillic letters are called. And they are both from Salonika, and Salonika was basically the place for missionizing the Slavic North. Okay, so this is basically all in general, how to call it, introduction to the history of the area, so that we can understand what happened to the Jews and with the Jews. So you see how Sultanate of Rum is established, because the Sultans consider themselves to be the heirs of, just like Germanic kings consider themselves to be heirs of the Roman Empire, so did the Ottoman Sultans. And their official title is the Emperor of Rome. The Emperor of Rome, right? Okay. So you can see basically how everything was already taken by the Ottomans besides Constantinople itself, right? This is right before the fall of Constantinople. Okay, these are the pictures. These are the pictures in different monasteries representing the fall of Constantinople. Our friend yesterday from the Jewish community of Yanina, Allegra, told us, but not everybody probably heard, because she told us this on the bus, that her late father published an article about Kinot, Tisha B'Av, typical for the Jews of Yanina, which imitate melodically and metrically and rhythmically the Kinot for the fall of Constantinople used in the Eastern Roman Orthodox Church, right? So, for the Orthodox Christian world, the fall of Constantinople, which was Nea Roma and Nea Jerusalem, New Rome and New Jerusalem, and when Hagia Sophia or Hagia Sophia, the church was built, they say that the king of the Eastern Roman Empire said, Solomon, I have finally outdone you. That's the word. I've finally outdone you. So Hagia Sophia was seen as the new temple, and Constantinople was seen as New Jerusalem. And what happens is that this was huge trauma for the Orthodox world. Just a small anecdote, so a small introduction to the Balkans. I was at some congress in Salonika, and a friend of mine from there, a Christian, local guy, he says, so how do you like Salonika? And I say, very much. And he says, oh, it's boring. You know, if you were to spend here an entire week, you would just pass away. So I say, why don't you move then to the capital, to Athens? And I'm speaking about, it was like 2005, 2006, and he was a young guy. So I say, why don't you move then to the capital, to Athens? And he says, Athens is not our capital. I'm not good at geography. That's why I have all these maps. So I think for a moment, and I say, no, Athens is your capital. He says, no, Constantinople. Right? So, okay, so there is yearning to return to Constantinople, felt amongst, the Russians wanted to get there in order to claim to be heirs to the Holy Roman Emperor.
They're still doing it.
Yes, they still do it. Okay, now here you can see in different monasteries, as like in Moldavia, right, the siege of Istanbul. So you can see how the Turks are represented, and so on. Now, okay, so you can see, right, if you make the fresco bigger, then you see how carefully it was painted, and yeah. Now here you can see that Eastern Roman Empire, just like Western Roman Empire, was not extremely philosemitic, to put it mildly. So here you can you have different frescoes which show how the Jews were seen. So you can see this is Judas, right? And basically he's wearing the Byzantine the Eastern Roman Jewish hat. So he's immediately recognized as modern Jew, not as the Jew of the New Testament period. So, and this is all just for us to understand how the Jews were perceived by this mighty Orthodox Christian empire. So, if you read the New Testament story, right, and if you read, for example, the Last Supper, you could say there are two legitimate readings. One legitimate reading is everybody is Christian. Since Jesus came, he established Christianity, right? All his disciples became Christians. There are good Christians like Peter, and there are bad Christians like Judas. But it's not our Jewish thing. It's Christian thing. It's eternal. We don't even have to care which Christians are good and which Christians are bad. There is another legitimate reading, which would be everybody is still Jewish. There is no new religion yet. Consequently, everybody is Jewish. Consequently, there are good Jews like Peter, and there are bad Jews like Judas. But this was not traditional Christian reading. Traditional Christian reading is, there are good Christians like Peter, there are bad Jews like Judas. Okay? So all Christians are good and all Jews are bad. And then, interestingly enough, the name of the apostle who betrayed Christ is the acronym of the entire nation. So it's very easy to be guilty by association. Jews are the followers of Judas, right? Or Jews are the heirs of Judas. Now Peter, who the heck is Peter? He's Shimon Kefa. Nobody called him Peter. If you were to tell him, "Hi, Peter," he would say, "To whom you are talking?" Exactly. His father called him Shimon, and everybody else called him Kefa. But no, we don't want the guy who established the church to be recognized as a Jew. So the New Testament changes his name. Everybody else stays Jewish, a Jewish name, right? But Peter's name is changed into Petros, the stone. Translation of Kefa. Okay, so the Jews are pigs, obviously, you can see. Their nose is depicted as a piggy one. Yeah?
Perhaps you already said it. What is the date of that painting or fresco, and do we know who did it?
This was 1537. This one immediately I will show others from the same monastery, so we'll see the year below. Okay, so here you can see the Jews who are catching Jesus also have piggy nose. Then Judas himself, who is betraying Jesus by a kiss, Judas' kiss, the famous Judas' kiss, right? He looks like Miss Peggy. And yeah, and here also, right? So all Jews who are involved in catching Jesus are piggy. And interestingly enough, over here you already see that they have Asiatic, Mongoloid features, right? So you see that how they don't have hair over here. Their moustache is, yeah. Okay, now here you can see the final judgment. The final judgment, in the depictions of the final judgment are very typical for different Orthodox churches and monasteries. And it's always interesting to see what happens with the Jews on the final day. Right? And it's not much different than final solution. The good thing, though, is that this final solution was left to God and was not undertaken personally. So obviously you see here the hell, and let's see who is there in the hell. Okay. So you see the Satan himself. Oh, this is the year, right? In 1537. So you see how Satan himself is leading Jewish kings, right? And it even says here, Yevresk, which is Jewish, right? Okay. But on the other side, the holy Jews, because New Testament in Christian tradition is the hair of the Old Testament. So all our shared heroes now become their heroes, right? So King David and all the prophets of Israel, they are all in paradise because they were proto-Christians, right? But the Jews who didn't recognize Christ ever since his arrival, they are all damned to hell. And then there are other hell customers always presented in Orthodox churches. These are the Turks and the Muslims in general. Okay, they also need to go straight to hell altogether, wholesale. Okay, and it says over here, Turci, right, the Turks. Okay, and then on the other side, you can't see it here, it's a huge picture. But then in the paradise, you have all Orthodox nations. You have here Romanians, right? These are Orthodox nations who go straight to paradise, right? These are another, these are the Saracens. They go to hell, obviously. Okay. Now I want to say a few words about Romaniotes rabbis. In other words, there are even some claims that the liturgy of Zohar is not Hispanic, Iberian one, but rather Byzantine one. And this is a claim raised by Professor Tashma, late Professor Tashma of Hebrew University. And we still don't know how to swallow this, because everybody believes that Zohar was written in Spain. But interestingly enough, it seems the proofs that he brings are showing quite convincingly that the liturgy followed by the original writers of the Zohar was Byzantine. So we don't know where these people could meet and how. We do know where Zohar was produced, but how it came in contact with Byzantine liturgy, we don't know. In any case, the Jews of the Byzantine Empire have had their own culture much before the expulsion from Spain. So the Jews of Anatolia and the Jews of Rhomania, the Jews of the Balkans, right? They were all Eastern Roman Jews. They all spoke Greek. They all wrote their Greek with Hebrew letters, just like all Jews since always wrote all Jewish languages with Hebrew alphabet. As such, these people obviously had major Talmudists, major commentators, major halachists, and so on. Most of the Jewish world today knows for at least one of them. You know, how can you assess whether the rabbi is really important or not? If he has an acronym, he's obviously important. Acronyms are probably invented because of laziness. I mean, come on, you can't say every time Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon. It's too much. If you keep mentioning the guy 3 billion times a day, right, as in yeshivot they do, so you can't say every time Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon says, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, so say Rambam. Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, so say Ramban, right? Rashi. You are not going to say every time you read the Rashi's commentary on the Talmud, you are not going to say every time Rabbi Shalomo Yitzchaki says. So you say Rashi. Then if a rabbi has a name, patronymic and second name, and no acronym, he was kaha kaha. Right? He was not two mentioned. So one of the Eastern Roman rabbis who has the acronym, and everybody uses it in modern Jewish world, is Re'em. Re'em. And he's, because the acronym of his name gives the Hebrew name for unicorn, right? He's also referred to as unicorn. And what does that mean? He's also referred to as unicorn, because then they would use, when referring to him, all kind of biblical verses in which the word unicorn, re'em, is mentioned. Right? Okay, so here I have only now, there is such a thing as rabbinical mafia. Now what does that mean, rabbinical mafia? The rabbis got married amongst themselves. In other words, if you were a Talmid Chachamim, the Talmud says specifically, Talmid Chacham is obliged to give his daughter to another Talmid Chacham. And any Talmid Chacham that would give his daughter to a commoner is transgressing the biblical prohibition, you should not lie with an animal. That's what Talmud says. The Talmud calls the commoners animals, and the Talmud says that rabbis are not supposed to give their daughters to animals. Right? I don't know. I mean, if we are politically correct, we will never understand anything. This is the way that things were, and rabbis really went to great lengths to find for their daughters suitable chatanim. Yes. And many a time this would mean that they will not see their grandchildren because daughters were not married to the first next door commoner, but to a rabbinical student 200 kilometers, 500 kilometers, 2,000 kilometers away. And still, that's what they did. Now, this doesn't mean, on one side, this does mean that there were Jewish rabbinical dynasties. Just like aristocracy in Christian world, Jews had intellectual aristocracy, and these people inherited. Okay, what does that mean, inherited? Books were written by hand. Not everybody had all the books. Even the great Chachamim had very partial libraries. If you were a commoner, your access to library was quite limited. But if you were a rabbinical son, if you were a son of a rabbi, you'll grow up in a library. And not only that, you need somebody to explain. Now, we should say for the merit of the rabbinical aristocracy that they were very open to any young intellectuals. They would recognize in the community such people, and then they would bring them in. They would give them their daughters, they would train them as rabbis, even though they were not born into rabbinic families. So this is just like knighthood. Is always bestowed on new people, right? And then new people become part of ruling aristocracy. Now the rabbis of different areas had dynasties who were ruling that part of Jewish world for centuries. If you take like rabbis, the famous rabbinical family Espardo, right? So they were running the Jewish business in Spain, and later in Salonika, and later all over in Amsterdam and in Morocco and so on. And it's a rabbi. Now imagine this. The thing was, the rabbis had 3, 4, 5, 6 sons, and all of them would get rabbinical training. So not all of them could stay and inherit the father, so they were exported. And basically, this is another way how to assess importance of Jewish community. The Jewish community that imports rabbis is unimportant. The Jewish community that exports rabbis is important. Rabbi who has an acronym is important. Rabbi who doesn't is not. So the Kapsalis were one of the ruling rabbinical families of the Eastern Roman Empire. And then you will see how everybody is Kapsali amongst the famous rabbis. So you can see here, first of all, Ham Ribi Eliezer Kapsali, Talmudist at Constantinople in the second half of the 15th century. In answer to appeal of the Karaites, whose literary degeneracy was then notorious, he consented to instruct them in the rabbinic disciplines, imposing only the conditions that his pupils should refrain from vilifying the Talmudic authorities and from desecrating the holidays of the rabbinical calendar. This attempt to reconcile the Karaites with Talmudic Judaism, or at least to soften their hostile attitudes towards it, didn't meet with the approval of the rigorist among the rabbis. Even Moshe Kapsali, who certainly was independent enough otherwise, stoutly opposed his relative Eliezer, perhaps chiefly because it wasn't customary to treat the Karaites in a friendly manner. Right? Okay. Then you have Ham Ribi Eliyahu ben Elkanah Kapsali. Turkish, I mean, this part of the empire was already conquered by the Turks. So Turkish Talmudist and historian, born at Candia about 1490, died there, we don't know, about 1555. In 1509, Kapsali left his native city to study at Padua, right? Under Judah Mintz. But Judah died. Judah dying 8 days after Kapsali's arrival. They later went to Ribi Meir Kanzelenbogen, Mintz's son-in-law. So you see how Jewish world was interconnected. And then the rabbi from the Eastern Roman Empire, recently conquered by the Turks, goes to Italy, and then if it doesn't work in Italy for him, he goes to Ashkenaz, right? So, right, these are some of the major works produced by this rabbi, for example, Sefer Divrei Hayamim Lemalchut Venezia. And this is very interesting. You see that Byzantine rabbis were not engaged only in Talmudic studies like Ashkenazi rabbis. They were high-ranking intellectuals, and just like any European intellectual would write you know, humanistic sciences, history. But interest, the Byzantine rabbis, the Eastern Roman rabbis, had genuine interest in history of Gentiles. How many rabbis you know that wrote histories of Gentiles? Rabbis usually don't write histories, and if they do, they write Jewish history. Okay, you will see, now there are a few exceptions, but most of them are in the Eastern Roman Empire. We will see later how another Kapsali wrote the history of the Turks, the history of the of the Ottoman Empire, right? So we see genuine interest in the world affairs, genuine interest in this community obviously was not autistic. It wasn't confined to a ghetto. It wasn't self-centered. And its rabbis were humanists who wanted to understand the world and to have Jews understand the world. And they were producing all of this in Hebrew, which means there was enough Hebrew reading public interested in history of Venice. Can you imagine that? Now, I think it's really fascinating. If they were to write this book in Greek, so you would say, okay, he's a rabbi, right, full-time job, but you know, on weekends he writes history for general public. But the guy is writing this in Hebrew, so that means that his reading public is Hebrew. That means that at least he imagines there is plenty of Jews interested in reading Venetian history in Hebrew. Okay, so the first work is a history of Venice, the manuscript of which is in the British Museum. You can see how Jewish world is not interested in these books today, because they are still manuscripts, right? Today. Okay. Then, Ham Ribi Elkanah ben David Kapsali, Turkish, again Turkish under the quotation marks, Talmudist and philanthropist of the second half of the 15th century. He was a pupil of his uncle, Rabbi Moshe Kapsali, at Constantinople, and so on. And then, the most famous one, Ham Rabbi Moshe ben Elia Kapsali, the Rem. He's the only one with the acronym, right? He wrote, this is a Jewish specialty. He wrote a commentary on Rashi's commentary on Torah. So that's what we call a super commentary, right? And only Jews are capable of producing that kind of literature, where you commentate what the commentator, and then his comment is not only about what Rashi says. His commentary many a time says, and it's interesting that Rashi doesn't say, and then he explains what Rashi doesn't say, because it would occur to him that Rashi should have. Okay, then he says, on a certain place he says, and we can learn as much from Rashi's shtikot as we learn from Rashi's diburim, right? Okay, so he also wrote, right? Yeah, sorry, this is Reim. Where is that? Yeah, sorry, this is Reim. Okay? Mizrahi. That's why he's called Re'em. Ribi Eliyahu Mizrahi. Resh Aleph Mem. Okay. Now, Sefer HaMizrahi, that's the way it's called. And then other things he wrote. Tosefet Semag. What's Semag?
So he wasn't Kapsali.
No, he wasn't Kapsali. He was, as you can see, I switched too soon over here. The last famous Kapsali is Rabbi Moshe ben Eliyahu Kapsali. And he was already the Chachambashi of the Ottoman Empire. And then Ham Rabbi Moshe died about 1495 at Constantinople. He was succeeded as Chachambashi by Ham Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi, his pupil. Okay, so Rem is the pupil of the last Mizrahi, right? And was born in Constantinople, was of Romaniote origin, meaning that his family was from Ottoman Greece, and not from Spanish exile. Okay, so basically, okay, Tosefet Semag, a collection of responsa called Teshuvot Re'em. But look at this is very Eastern Roman Jewish. Mizrahi also authored works on mathematics, right? We don't know Rashi producing works on mathematics or astronomy, or the Ashkenazi Judaism was quite different. So the Eastern Roman Judaism seems to be much more similar to Sephardic tradition than to Ashkenazi tradition, because most of the rabbis were humanists, learned in general sciences and not only in Jewish sciences, right? So he wrote works on mathematics and science, Sefer HaMispar on arithmetic, a commentary on Ptolemy's Almagest, an important text on astronomy, and so on. Okay? A commentary on Euclid's Elements. Right? Okay. So, this is the last thing,
Would that have been read by the general public or just only the
Jewish public, it's written in Hebrew, all of it in
All
Hebrew.
of his work.
Yeah, all of his work is in Hebrew, so that means that not only the rabbis, but there was also maybe tiny, but existent Jewish Eastern Roman elite who would read those books. Yes?
But that can be understood because the Ottomans had all the works of the Greeks and the Romans translated.
Not the Ottomans, the Arabs.
The Arabs, and then much later it went to Europe. So the Jews were living among that environment. So why not the rabbis?
Of course,
About the
of course. But even when sciences got to Europe, Ashkenazim were open to them only after the Enlightenment, not before that.
After what?
Enlightenment. Now this is also something very interesting. How many times you see a rabbi with a cross? Yeah, but that's okay. So that cross was not considered by the Romaniotes rabbis as idol worshipping, but rather as decoration by the king, right? So they ascribed to it national secular importance, and he was wearing it as a chief rabbi. Now you can see he is totally dressed as Christian Orthodox dressed. And this is a Romaniote rabbi, and this is Romaniote rabbi of Volos during the Holocaust, right? So you can see that until very recently, if you would see a Romaniote rabbi on the street, you wouldn't recognize him from an Orthodox dress.
Who established him as the chief rabbi?
He was chief rabbi of Greece after the war. After the war, he was the chief rabbi of entire Greece. The Federation of Jewish Communities of Greece. Federation. Oh, not the king. Not the king. Okay, so this is one of the major stories of recent Romaniote lives. This rabbi, who was rabbi of Volos, saved almost the entire Jewish community of Volos. Germans entered Volos in 43, and on Erev Rosh Hashanah, on the eve of Jewish New Year, they went to the rabbi's house, and they told him, "We need the lists of all the Jews." And the rabbi told them, "Oh, that's kind of problem, because now we have 2 days Rosh Hashanah. But as soon as we are done with the holiday, I'll bring you." And then, on eve of Rosh Hashanah, he went to speak with Archbishop, he went to speak with the city mayor, and he went to speak with the partisans in the woods. And then he sent emissaries to each Jewish home, telling them that they need to leave tonight for the woods. Now, he was very authoritarian rabbi, and this is what saved the community. People just listened to him. He was very charismatic, he was also very authoritarian, and when he said something, people did it. There are stories by Christians from Volos how the rabbi would slap a guy who was a Christian guy who was rude to his wife. Right? He was a moral authority in Volos, and Christian couples went to him for counseling. Christian ladies went to him to complain about their husbands, right? And Christians were kissing his hands when he was passing through the street.
Maybe that's what he looked like there in East
No, the city was too small.
Where is Poland?
Okay, you are from here.
Volos is just below Pelion Mountain, and Pelion Mountain is very close to Olympus. That is, we're talking about Thessaly, central Greece. Volos is in central Greece, it's by the water, eastern central Greece.
Now here I'm already starting the second lecture because that's exactly what I'm supposed to do. You will see here exactly how the situation in Salonika and situation in Volos was different. Salonika was newly acquired by.
How large was the Jewish community in Volos?
2,000 people. Okay, so here you have the entire. Here you have him, and you can see this. This is typical. Shaul, you know this? This is typical of.
It's like
It looks. Yeah. Which map? Volos. I will find the map. Okay. So here you see the rabbi. You see that he's wearing the hat, which is typical of Orthodox Greece. It's called kamilabki, right? And then he has this thing, which Jews look at and say, oh, this looks like the Meil of Sefer Torah, right? And therefore the rabbi is the walking Torah, Gabrarapa. But on the other side, this just looks like epitrachilion of an Orthodox major priest, right? So this was all mutam. How do you say mutam?
Coordinated.
Yeah, okay. So it was all culturally coordinated, yeah. Okay. So here is the story. Here is the story. In the early 20th century, the city of Volos had a vibrant Jewish community. It rose to 2,000 in 1930, right? Before falling drastically to 882 members in 1940, due to the emigration of the great cities of Thessaloniki and at Athens or abroad. Okay, here you have the entire story. We don't need to read it now. You will have it on the Dropbox, and whoever has a problem opening Dropbox, I will send him in an individual email. So this is a few informations about the Romaniotes minhag, right? So the Romaniotes had distinct customs, very different from those of the Sephardic Jews and closer to those of Italian Jews, because Italian Jews and Romaniote Jews are Jews of Roman Empire, obviously. Two sides of the Adriatic Sea, right? Some of these are thought to have been based on Jerusalem Talmud instead of the Babylonian Talmud. Unlike the Sephardic Jews, they didn't speak Ladino, but the Yevanic Greek dialect and Greek. Tuvia ben Eliezer, a Greek-speaking Talmudist and poet of the 11th century, worked and lived in the city of Castoria. He's the author of the Lekach Tov, a Midrashic commentary on the Pentateuch. Now, many people are familiar with the work. Lekach Tov was quite quoted, but most of the people do not know that he was Eastern Roman Jew. And the 5 Megillot, and also some poems. Romaniote scholars translated the Tanakh into Greek, a polyglot edition of the Bible published in Constantinople in 1547, because the community was already mixed, Sephardic and Romaniote. So they did Hebrew, Aramaic, Judeo-Greek, and Judeo-Spanish in order to follow the public reading of Torah, right? And in order to understand what he was reading, you would have a polyglot edition of Tanakh. It's crazy, it's beautiful.
Excuse me, where can you find a copy of that?
There are reprints of, so there is a reprint of Judeo-Spanish, there is a reprint of Judeo-Greek, but the polyglot edition doesn't exist anymore because there is not a single Jew that needs both. There is not a single community, not a single Jew. There is not a single community today that needs both things. But you can find the copies in Hebrew books, certainly, in Jewish National Library, and so on. Now, something about the Minhagim. The Romaniote Jews subdivided the Torah in Sedarim, not Perashiot, or Parshiot, as the Ashkenazim say. And they read the whole Torah in the Palestinian way of 3 years cycle. So their public reading of Torah was much less imposing than ours. Because imagine, It was a third of our parasha. They were following the Minhag Eretz Israel, right? They also had their own order for reading the Haftarah. Romaniot Haftarot are not the same as Sephardic or Ashkenazi. The Romaniot Torah scrolls are housed in Tekim. Shalom already spoke about that. And they were never taken completely out. The Siddur prayer book for the Romaniot rite was known as Mahzor Rhomania. But not because of Romania, modern Romania. Now here I need to interrupt. There is a known scholar of Ladino today at Sorbonne. Her name is Marie-Christine Barrol. And as you can hear from the name, she is Christian. Yeah. Now this is probably the first time in history that somebody felt in love, besides you, that somebody felt in love first with his mother-in-law and later with So what happened was Marie-Christine Barrot was an expert for Roman languages, and she was in Istanbul, and she was passing from the Europe to Asia in Istanbul by boat, and then she heard a nice old lady screaming in medieval Spanish at her son. Like, don't be stupid, but do that, do this. And she said, and I was hypnotized. And then I paid attention to the guy, and he was also nice looking, and then they started speaking. And she fell in love with him also, and they got married, and today she's professor of Judeo-Spanish. But look at this. She says, I understood the language immediately, at least the Spanish base. However, even today, after being 30 years married into a Sephardic family, I don't understand what you mean by those words in no way. So I say, what the heck? And she says, well, I'm speaking with my mother-in-law. Now listen to this. This is really Balkans. I'm speaking to my mother-in-law. And she says, well, what do you want? Armenians are also Greek. So I say, how can Armenians be Greek? And she says, well, they are not Turks like Albanians. Okay. No. It's not crazy at all. Greek is a synonym in Ladino for Christian.
Can you repeat this again?
Of course. What do you want? Armenians are also Greek. So she says, how can Armenians be Greek? He says, well, they are not Turks like Albanians. Okay, now Albanians are mostly Muslim, Turk is a synonym for Muslim, and Greek is synonym for Christian. And this is already belonging highly to the second lecture, and Sephardim, and the meeting of Sephardim and Romaniotes, and so on. When I was teaching Ladino, I'm not teaching Ladino anymore, the language, but when I was, I used to bring some of the old-timers to the classroom, because I wanted my pupils to know that I'm not inventing all of this. And there were really such people. And then this is something that new sociological investigation could and should be conducted about. Because it's always the same response. I call somebody who is 70, 80, 90 years old, and I say, hi, I know you are a Ladino speaker. I'm Eliezer Papo. I'm teaching at Ben-Gurion University. I'm teaching Ladino at Ben-Gurion University, and I would like to bring them a native, old-timer speaker so that you can, share experience of your life. And then it's always one and the same response. Oh, thank you. Thank you. And there is always one and the same response. Oh, of course, Ladino is the language of our fathers, Ladino is the language of our mothers, Ladino is the language in which we dream, but we don't speak it, but I will come, I will certainly come, I will be happy to come. And then they come, and then the first sentence they say in the classroom always is, well, I didn't really speak Ladino. I didn't really speak Ladino. Everybody. Why? Because that generation saw Ladino as jargon. So that's something spoken by common masses. His family, however, was already franchised, or whatever is the English word, metrofeted. Acculturate, yeah. So, now listen to this. I bring them a young guy, an old guy from Izmir, Smyrna. And now listen to this very carefully, it's beautiful. Imagine Israeli students. Now Israeli students usually don't know anything about diaspora. For example, somebody comes to my class and she says, "Oh, you are from Yugoslavia, I'm so excited. My grandmother is from Yugoslavia." So I say, "Oh, from where?" She says, "From Yugoslavia." And that's all she knows. And under Zionist outlook, that's all she needs to know. Because, right, you just came from someplace, who cares? Everybody came from someplace. And now we are here, and you just remember the name of the place. For example, okay, so what happens? What happens? I bring this guy from Izmir, and he says the following. Oh, well, you see, in my family, we didn't really speak Ladino. We were rich, so we lived on the outskirts of the city, in villas. Most of my neighbors were Turks, so I grew up speaking Turkish with Turkish children. Then when I came to Alliance Israélite Universelle, and I was speaking Ladino with Turkish accent, everybody called me a Greek. Now imagine Israeli students not grasping anything. I grow up, right, in Izmir with Turks. I came to Alliance Israélite Universelle. They don't even understand why should the name of the Jewish school would be in French, right? And then he comes to Alliance Israélite Universelle, and he's speaking Ladino with Turkish accent, and then everybody calls him a Greek, right? So one student says, "Everybody call you Turkish." And he says, "No, Greek." But he doesn't explain. For him, it's totally logical. There's nothing to explain. So I say, well, they wanted to imply that he speaks as a Gentile. But for them, who lived in the old city of Izmir, Gentiles were Greek, not Turks. So they wanted to tell him, "You speak like a Goy." Foreigner. So, you speak like a Greek. Okay, but then Israelis say, "Oh, so Izmir is in Greece." Then the guy, the old guy, and he's already, you know, angered by this, and he says, "No, Izmir is in Turkey, but the people of Izmir are in Greece, because people of Salonika are in Istanbul." Okay? There was exchange of populations, obviously. For him, that was something totally obvious, right? But can you imagine Israeli students listening to this? Yeah. Can you imagine Israeli students listening to this?
Could you please make a 5-second explanation of what we're talking?
I will.
There is Portuguese and there is Spanish.
I will.
And the letters.
I will immediately. Now I'll just tell you another anecdote of the same sort. I bring a lady from Istanbul. And again, I spoke with her on the phone, Zelda Obadia. And she says, "Oh, certainly, with pleasure, of course, Ladino, whenever I have opportunity, I always come. It's so important to bring it to our children." Okay, and then she comes, and the first thing she says in the classroom, "In my home, we didn't really speak Ladino." Okay, and then she says, "Because you see, my father wanted my brothers to speak good Greek. It was very good for business. And my mother wanted us daughters to get married well. So she spoke to us in French. So our father spoke to us in Greek, and our mother spoke to us in French, and I spoke Judo-Spanish only with my grandparents." And then, yeah, of course. And then, but now this is Israeli students, and she's speaking to them. They think in modern national states concepts, right? So she's from Turkey. So Turkish, obviously. What Greek, what French? Even Judeo-Spanish is hard for them to imagine. You are from Turkey, you speak Turkish. So, right. So then some of the kids says, "And Turkish." And she says, "Oh, no, Turkish? I'm not from Turkey, I'm from Istanbul." Okay, now for the Jews, Istanbul was a planet, and then Turkey, it was a planet surrounded by Turkey. Right? So they didn't consider at all Istanbul to be I mean, if you are from Turkey, you are from Anatolia, right? And you are Andavali, and you are not extremely smart in Turkish internal narrative. But if you are from Istanbul, or from Pera, which is the combined Jewish-Greek neighborhood, then you are something. Okay, so now I'm getting back to the Volos story, the rabbi who saved the Jewish community. And I want to answer your question about Ladino, and believe me, it will all come together.
It's important that people
Yeah.
understand what is Ladino.
So, when Jews, first of all, I'm against nationalist narratives, especially in science. There was no Ladino in Spain. There couldn't be Ladino in Spain. The same way no Jew, you said Brooklyn, right? Yeah. Well, no Jew in Brooklyn today speaks Junglish, Jewish English. If you are Jewish and you are from Alabama, you speak Alabaman English. And if you are from New York, right, you speak fabulous. Actually, you speak fabulous English, but you don't speak Junglish. Now, it doesn't matter whether you are from Alabama or from New York. In any case, you will say, darling, would you like to make the kiddush in the sukkah or on the balcony, right, or inside, right? But this doesn't convert it into another language. It's same Alabama English, or same Texas English, or same New York English, with few Hebrew words.
It's a dialect.
It's not even a dialect. It's not even a dialect. It's not even a dialect. Because it's matters sometimes of accent, if they are newcomers, and these are mostly lexical things. Sometimes they are also syntactical, like when you say in New York, what's doing? And it's translation from Yiddish, and it doesn't mean anything in English. What's doing? Yeah. What's doing?
Is it a pinch?
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So listen to this. Jews in Spain, first of all, there was no such thing as Spain. Spain only got united when Jews were kicked out. And Spain didn't speak one single language. The Jews of Catalonia spoke Catalan. And the Jews of Valencia spoke Valencian, and the Jews of Castilla spoke Castilian. And the Jews of Andalus spoke Arabic. Andalus was reduced to one single city, Granada and its surroundings, but still Jews of Granada in 1492 spoke Arabic. Right? So, obviously every single Jew in Catalonia and Valencia and Castilla and Andalus would ask his wife, would you like to make Kiddush in the Sukkah or inside? But this didn't make those languages to be Jewish languages. They were just speaking the language of the country, just like anybody else, introducing few Hebrew words and concepts. Okay. What happened is that when Jews were expelled from Spain, they came to the Ottoman Empire. And still everybody spoke his own language. The people who came from Aragon spoke Aragonese. The people who came from Castilla spoke Castilian, and so on. The people who came from Portugal spoke Portuguese. And you can see that all over the Ottoman Empire, they established their own synagogues. And you can see that the synagogues who were established immediately in the aftermath of the expulsion usually bore the names of the provinces. So you would have, for example, Cal Castilla, Cal Aragon, Cal Portugal, Cal meaning Cajal, right? Capital. Cajal Aragon, right? Okay, obviously, each of them spoke its own language. So how come Ladino came into existence? First of all, it was created in the Ottoman Empire. It was created in the Ottoman Empire, specifically Jewish language. And there are two reasons why Castilian actually absorbed all other Iberian dialects. So basically Ladino today is Castilian in terms of its grammar and the overwhelming majority of its lexical font. Two reasons. First of all, Spain itself got unified under Castilian at the same time, and they were exporting Castilian to the New World. The provinces, whether they were governed by a Christian aristocrat from Aragon, or a Christian aristocrat from Catalonia, or a Christian aristocrat from Castilla, the language of administration was Castilian. So the entire New World was run by Castilian. And Jews, even expelled Jews as minority, if they had any aspiration of being part of international trade, should just follow the same world notion. You don't swim against the world, you swim with the world. That's external reason. And then internal reason is that there are few rich Jews from Castilla who established yeshivot in the Ottoman Empire. And obviously they gave jobs to Castilian rabbis. And then Castilian rabbis were teaching in Spanish in those yeshivot. And then everybody else very soon adopted, because just like the Gentile commoners imitate aristocracy, Jewish commoners imitate rabbinical elite. So everybody was trying to be posh as the Rosh Hashiva. Now, what happened is that Jews preserved the medieval Spanish, which means that in Ladino, until very today, you can hear J and J and Sh, which were all reduced to Ch in modern Spanish. So in modern Spanish, you say hijo, ojo, right? In Judeo-Spanish, you say hijo, ojo. Then, in modern Spanish, you say enjugar las manos, right? To dry your hands. And then in Judeo-Spanish, you say enjugar, sh, enjugar las manos. In modern Spanish, you say gente, gentil, right? In Judeo-Spanish, you say gente, gentil. In modern Spanish, you say judío. In Judeo-Spanish, you say judío or judío. So basically, Ladino preserves the phonology of Spanish, of 15th century Spanish. Now, other dialects were not totally dropped. They entered the lexical font of Ladino. Sometimes even the grammar is shared, because these are all Roman languages. But there are syntactical constructions which also came to Ladino from Portuguese and so on. But most importantly, the pronunciation of vowels in certain areas of the Balkans, where the first comers were Portuguese Jews, for example, in Monastir, or for example, in certain community in Salonika, which later moved to Sarajevo. Just like in Portuguese, in certain parts of Portugal, an accentuated O is not pronounced as O, is pronounced as U. And an accentuated E is not pronounced as E, but as E. And this is the way, for example, the Northern Balkans speak. Now, this doesn't mean that everybody in Northern Balkans comes from Portugal. But it means that when the community was established, there was a huge number of people who came from Portugal. And even though they adopted Spanish, they pronounced it the Portuguese way. And then everybody who joined the community proceeded speaking Spanish the Portuguese way. So, for example, I'll just give you one example. Let's say that you are from Istanbul. Istanbulis speak in a very Castilian way. So, this would be a sentence in Istanbuli Judeo-Spanish. Tengo una hija casada que vive en Naharia, se llama Susana. Tengo una hija casada, I have a married daughter, que vive en Naharia, se llama Susana. Now, the same sentence in the north of the Balkans would be tengo, not tengo. Tengo una fija, fija with F. Fija casada, que vive, not que vive, que vive in Naharia, se llama, not se llama. Because if the accent is not on E, it closes into E, just like in Portuguese. But look at this. In Bitola and Pristina, final A in any kind of word, noun, adjective, verb, is pronounced as E. So they would say, tengo una fija casada que vive en Naharia, se llama Susana. So it wouldn't be tengo una fija casada. No, tengo una fija casada. Tengo una figlio casata che vive in Haria, si chiama Susanna. Okay, so as soon as a Ladino speaker opens the mouth, you know to locate him. At least, roughly speaking, whether he is from Northern Balkans or Southern Balkans. Okay. Yeah.
Ladino is a Jewish, Spanish language.
Exactly.
Correct? It's like Yiddish was in Europe, you have Ladino in all
Europe.
in all of the Spanish countries.
It's in Europe also, so you can't say.
No, I meant in the Ashkenazi area where they spoke Yiddish.
In Eastern Europe.
Eastern Europe. So
In
that
Southern Europe, you would have
Latino, and that was the spoken language
of the Jews. Yes, exactly, exactly.
Okay.
So it's a Sephardic Yiddish.
Okay, got it.
Sephardic Yiddish. Now,
Okay, no,
this is introduction to Sephardic.
I wasn't sure exactly where.
Okay, yeah. No, we finished that. That was the first lecture from 8 to 9, and we have done the Greeks, and now I will just do a small comparison. What happened? When Jews of Spain came to the Ottoman wheel, not only they did not want to assimilate into the local Jewish community, but they didn't even want to assimilate among themselves. They had their own communities. And this is something extremely important. This is something extremely important to understand. Spain is a huge country. Jews living in Spain lived under the false impression that there is such a thing as Judaism. That everybody follows, the minhagim are the same, the pronunciation are the same, we belong to one same dispersed nation. Because they never met each other. Now, the Jews who lived in Catalonia, imagine the Jews in Andalusia are just like that. And the Jews who lived in Castilla, imagine the Jews who lived in Valencia are just like that. When they met, they were highly disappointed. Of course. And then nobody would give into the others. So they wouldn't eat from each other's shekitah. Each community would establish its own shekitah. Of course. Now, okay. Now imagine. This wouldn't be such a huge problem if all the Jews of Barcelona were to leave for Istanbul, and if all the Jews of Toledo were to leave for Salonika. But the problem was that in every single big Ottoman city, you had few Jews from Barcelona, few Jews from Toledo, few Jews from Cordoba. And then each of them praying in its own synagogue. Each of them having their own rabbi, their own shochet, and their own bet din. Okay. Now what happened? During entire 16th century. No, at the beginning they didn't intermarry. Of course not. Of course not. Okay, so now imagine.
God forbid.
God forbid. So now imagine this. If, let's say that God forbid, somebody would kick out the Jews of America tomorrow. Okay, and let's say that 5,000 Jews from Manhattan come to Tirana in Albania. Okay? And let's say that there are 500 local Jews in Albania. Now who's going to assimilate whom? No. The American Jews will assimilate Albanian Jews because they are coming with this mentality of Axis Mundi. Axis Mundi goes to their southern part. Okay, so that's Axis Mundi. Okay, and then, so what happens is, the same way Jews came from Spain to Morocco, and they established their own synagogues, right? And they were local Jews. And then they have takanot. They have statutes of the community. And they say, if a Megorash wants to marry a forastero. Forastero means a foreigner. And who is the foreigner? the local Jews. No, the local Jews. Yeah, but you are a foreigner. You just came. These people live in Morocco for 1,000 years. And then you come to their home and you call them foreigners. Why? Because these people are coming with imperial mentality. That they are coming, they're coming from the center of the world. So when the Spaniards came to the Ottoman Empire, they all acted as
Rulers of the universe.
exactly, rulers of the universe. So what happened is that very soon, wherever the Romaniotes were outnumbered, and in most of the cities the Romaniotes were outnumbered, they just learned Spanish. Now imagine this. This is something fascinating. You are born in the Eastern Roman Empire. You live there for 1,500 years. Then somebody is kicked from Spain. And then your children and your grandchildren speak Spanish. Because they are assimilated by the dominant Jewish culture, by the dominant Jewish community. Within a century, most of the Romaniote Jews learned Ladino. And Ladino was actually being invented in the Ottoman Empire on base of Castilian with influences of Portuguese pronunciation or of Catalan lexicon or Hebrew and Aramaic words which were already introduced in Spain, and then later Ottoman, Turkish or Arabic or Persian or Slavic or Greek words introduced to during, how do American Olim Kadashim speak in Israel? Oh, don't worry, I'll help you. You just need to go to Mishnah Pnim, right? There is a Dalpak, there is a Pekida over there. She will give you all the tefasim, right? You fill them. There is a small Hanut across Mishnah Pnim, right? So you go there, you take 2 tmunot passports, Okay. Advise this. Now you would think the teacher of these people is Eliezer ben Yehuda, he speaks fluent Hebrew. But no, they know 500 Hebrew words, right? But they entered their English. Okay, so the same thing was typical for the Jews of the Ottoman Empire. Why would they bother to find Spanish word for Iria? Or Spanish word for Arnona? Or Spanish word for Teudat Zeus? All the concepts they were meeting on a daily basis, so all kind of government-related issues, it was all Ottoman Turkish, right? It was all Ottoman Turkish. Then, what you do, you Spanify these words. The same way, have you heard the Spanish-speaking people speaking English? In a standard English, I like very much his style. He has a very good style, right? Okay, so that's also what the Jews are doing. So if the city is called Split, and Italians call it Spalato, Jews can't say Spalato, just like you said yesterday. It's with Shva Nach, and Jews don't use Shva Nach, at least they didn't then. So they say Espalato. So the Jews, the city in Macedonia called Shtip. No, Jews called it Eshtip. Eshtip, right? Of course. And then if you write, of course, Aleph and Yud. And then if you write Shtip without Aleph, it's invalid, it's Pasul. The get is Pasul. Okay, so most of the Jews, it was the 16th century was a century of creation of modern Sephardic Ottoman identity. The common language of the Jews was created then. The common identity of the Jews was created then. The common liturgy of Sephardic Jews was created then. Whoever was with us in Sarajevo remembers this story, because the unification of entire Jewish world, halakhical unification of the entire Jewish world, was brought about by the expulsion of Spanish Jews. Before that, every single community was conducting its life according to its own minhagim, and everybody had this general ideology of Knesset Israel, which didn't mean anything. Practically, it didn't mean anything. When all these expulsees met in one single city, and they had 500 different minhagim for every single thing. The rabbis knew that either they will reunify the community, either they will perish as a nation. So the first attempt was made by Rabbi Yaakov Berav, who wanted to, in order to do the reform of Jewish law, he wanted to re-establish the Sanhedrin. But then the rabbis didn't want it. They didn't like the idea. Why? Every single rabbi prefers to be the king of a village instead of a porter in a big city. So, Rabbi Yaakov Berav could not re-establish the Sanhedrin. Rabbi Yosef Karo said we need one single law. But before that, it's a very gradual process. First of all, he said, Mishneh Torah. Let's embrace Mishneh Torah. Why they didn't accept Ramban? Because he didn't bring his sources. I'll bring his sources. And then the first major work produced by Rabbi Yosef Karo is Kesef Mishneh. And Kesef Mishneh is bringing the sources for Ramban in order for Mishneh Torah to be accepted as Jewish constitution. And then rabbis didn't like it. Why? There's a reason. No, over there it's something else. Maimonides brings only the Talmudic law. He doesn't treat the minhagim at all. Now, what's the difference between Judaism and Torah? Torah is what Jews are supposed to do. Judaism is what Jews do instead. Now, Rambam was making a resume of Torah, but there was no Judaism in it. He doesn't treat, the most important things like which sign you make of tefillin, whether it's triple sheen or four, right? All these things that make Jews Jews. The minhagim. Okay, so Maran then recognized that due to the meeting with the Ashkenazim in Christian Spain, the concept of Jewish law was different, and he needed actually to follow not the resume of Torah, but the resume of Judaism. So he took Arba'at Turim. Now Arba'at Turim is produced by whom? Rabbeinu Yaakov ben Asher. His father was very important, so he has an acronym, Rosh. Rabbeinu Asher, Rosh. Now Rosh was a Jewish German expulsee to Toledo. When he came to Toledo, he proceeded the Ashkenazi tradition. His son was already adopting Sephardic form and putting into it the Ashkenazi content. So he wrote, on base of his father's decision, he wrote the compendium of Jewish law called Arba'at Turim. Right? Now, the very idea of codification is Sephardic, it's not Ashkenazi. So he follows Rabbeinu Yaakov ben Harosh in Spain, before the expulsion. He follows the Sephardic idea of codification. But the content of the codification is Ashkenazi, which means it includes minhagim. And then, it's not like Rambam, Sefer Hamadah, the book of knowledge of God, Sefer Ahava, the book of love of God. Rambam's book is Torah, so it's theocentric. Now, the Arba'at Turim, if you follow the Arba'at Turim, Ora Chaim, right? Even Haezer, Yoreh De'ah, Hoshe Mishpat. It's a circle that's, it's opening the Adashah. So, it's first man and his God, man and his wife, man and the family, man and the community. Right? So it's a different scope. Okay. So, Rabbi Yosef Karo says, now I will establish Bet Din, I will establish Bet Din of the dead rabbis. Because living rabbis cannot accept living rabbis as authority. That they don't have problem with dead rabbis. So he says, no, it's very logical. So he says, you know what? Now I will take Arba'at Turim. Every single word he says, I will run by the Bet Din of three. Rif, Ramban, and Rosh. Now, why is he doing so? Because he wants to establish one single tradition for those who are following North African Andalusian tradition, Rif and Rambam, and those who are following the Christian Spain tradition, Rosh. But we see where his heart lies. Why? Because the game is unfair. Why the game is unfair? Because Rif and Rambam always agree. So, it's always, everything important in Jewish law, under this principle established by Maran, follows Rif and Rambam, which are the same school. And Rosh is always minority opinion. And then, his great book called Bet Yosef was created, which is the commentary on Arba'a Turim. Now imagine, you remember at the airport, with all those announcements in the middle, how we spoke about Me'am Lo'ez and the name of Me'am Lo'ez. Knowing the name of the book is knowing half of the ideology of the book. When Kesef Mishneh, what's Kesef Mishneh? His commentary on Maimonides is Mishneh Torah, right? That's his first one. Where Kesef Mishneh is mentioned? In Torah. That's Pasuk. Of course. In which part? When he puts the double money on top of their backs, right? So he wants to manipulate them, right? To come to Egypt, accept his sovereignty and all of that. So they came and they paid to him for the wheat that they were carrying to their father Jacob in the land of Israel. Then Yosef puts into their backs Kesef Mishneh, double amount of Kesef. Okay. What does this tell us about the work? So you have the word Mishneh, which means that first of all, he's humbling himself, and he sees himself as secondary to Rambam. But on the other side, he is also Yosef Karo. And he will bring everybody to Rambam's law by this manipulation of Kesef Mishneh. The same way Yosef brought everybody under his sovereignty to Egypt. Rabbi Yosef Karo will use Mishneh Torah to bring everybody under his interpretation of Rambam. So it's under Rambam's sovereignty when I'm the interpreter of the Rambam. Then, it doesn't work, we said. So his second work, the commentary on Arba'a Turim, is called Bet Yosef. Wow. Bet Yosef, it's in the same parasha. It's in the same parasha because the manipulation brings the 10 tribes back to Bet Yosef. They brought them together with Kesef Mishneh to Bet Yosef. And then a miracle happens. The rabbinical aristocracy recognizes that this could work. These rabbis are not living rabbis, so we are not seizing our authority to anybody. We do need unity and we do recognize that. Let's accept this book. So the rabbis ask him to make a resume of the book, right? Which would bring not the entire procedure, but only the settled law. And then this book is called? No, only Shulchan Aruch, without Kitzur. Shulchan Aruch is Kitzur of Bet Yosef. The fact that we have Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, that's something else. Now, Bet Yosef, Kitzur Bet Yosef is called Shulchan Aruch. Which pasuk is that? That's pasuk. Obvious pasuk, which contains his claim to be King David, to be the king of the Jews. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai Roi lo echsar. Bino desher mitzeni al bemenuchoten al nasher v'yesek leman shemo gam kelech v'get salma v'lo ila'ala כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני תערוך לפניי שולחן נגד צורריי. So I'm King David. God will be Orech Shulchan in front of me against my enemies, against people who have different interpretation of the law. So he's basically the new King David who wrote the new constitution for the Jews. It's beautiful. If you know to follow the secret of rabbinical giving names to their books, right? You understand half of the ideology, half of the people wrote a book for 20 years and 20 years they were thinking about the title.
But it's more than that. I mean, the table is set, and we know what is on the table.
Of course, and it's more. That's obvious. That I don't even think I need to explain, because the Sifra says Shulchan Aruch. That means alachot, which are on the Shulchan. But that's obvious. But there is hidden meaning also. Yeah.
The concept of the three rabbis.
Because Bet Din has 3 rabbis.
Yes, but when did the Din start? I mean, then?
Oh no, Bet Din.
What?
Shofetim v'shoterim titen lecha bechol sha'arecha. So the Torah already establishes some kind of tribunal. According to later rabbinical interpretation, this is the Supreme Court of 70, right? And then in every province, you would have a smaller Bet Din. How much was that? Sanhedria Ktana was 21.
It's a murder case.
And then the small Bet Din is 3 people. En dan yachid ela yechido shel olam. Not a single person should judge single-handedly unless he is the single master of the universe. So only God doesn't need Trinity. Only God doesn't need Trinity, but human Bet Din needs 3 people. So the unity of the Jews was established linguistically by the same language called Ladino, halachically by the same book called Shulchan Aruch, right? And then how the Ashkenazim entered the picture. Rabbi Moshe Serles, Rama is important, so he has an acronym. Rabbi Moshe Iserles, okay, he is from Krakow, and he says, look at this. The Sephardim are now united under one single constitution. This is an opportunity that we shouldn't lose to reunify the entire Jewish world. But the problem is, the constitution represents their tradition. It doesn't represent our. So what does he do? He writes a commentary called Mapa. Mapa is something that you put on the Shulchan, right? And, okay, so it's Mapa on the Shulchan. And any place which is like 2/3 of the places. It's crazy. It's very Jewish. So on 2/3 of the places where Rabbi Yosef Karo decides, following the 2, Rif and Rambam, against Rosh, Rabbi Moshe Serles says, and in our countries the minhag is like this. So he actually reintroduces by the back door the Rosh Ashkenazi tradition. Now, today, we have one single constitution, I mean, religiously speaking. It's called Shulchan Aruch. Everybody follows Shulchan Aruch. The Sephardim, the Oriental, the Ashkenazim. Now, the Sephardim follow only the big letters. Ashkenazim follow big letters with emendations. And it's usually, if there is emendation, it's usually saying the opposite of what the big letter says. Like, let's say, big letters say, there is contradiction of opinions whether you should do A or B. Most of the people are saying A, consequently we do A. And then the commentary says, but in this part of the world we do B. And then it goes to entire Shulchan Aruch, saying on every single place we do it differently. Objection, we beg to differ. But at least it's under the same roof. Now, in certain part of Greece, like Yanina, where we were yesterday, there was not too many Sephardim came, and the local community was stronger than the Manhattan newcomers, so the Sephardim assimilated into Romaniotes. Now today, it's all construction. What does it mean, it's all construction? Most of the, if you go to any single Sephardic community all over, or Romaniot community, if you, for example, if you were yesterday to look at the names of the Jews who perished during the Holocaust in Yanina, you could see that at least 5% of them were called Ashkenazi.
Yeah.
Okay, now what does that mean?
They were
Well, in that case, they were Romaniotes. So they were Ashkenazi Jews who came to a Romaniote community, and they became Romanized. So, over there you could see many Sephardic names also. These were the people who were Sephardized. But in any single Sephardic community in the Upper Balkans, including, starting with the second name Papo, it's a Romaniote name. It's not name attested in Spain. Right? So basically, Jews come from Spain, they come to Salonika. There are Romaniote Jews in Salonika called Papo, or Caleb, or Menachem. Just like the Iraqi Jews, Romaniote Jews, like 1/3 of Romaniote second names are first Hebrew names. Like David, they have second name David, second name Menachem, second name Ezra, second name, right? Okay, so some of these Jews were Sephardized in Salonika, and then they come as Sephardim to Belgrade or to Bulgaria. So it's all matter of culture. For example, the rabbi of Volos, Rabbi Pesach, who saved the community, and he was the Romaniote rabbi. Okay, I'm working with his manuscript called Ahev Mishpat, and his remarks are written in Judeo-Spanish. So you say, what the heck? I thought you were a Romaniote rabbi. Yes, but the same way Aryeh Deri speaks some Yiddish, because he learned, of course, because he learned in, of course. Now, big yeshivot were in Salonika. The Salonika, and this is something that I want, I mean, we will have an entire class about that. Entire class which is called Salonika, a city in which even the Muslims are Jewish. Okay, because to what I'm referring, to the famous story of Shabbatai Tzvi. The guy proclaimed to be Messiah, and we will have another lecture only on this proclamation and so on. Now he proclaimed to be Messiah, and then interestingly enough, the Turks didn't kill him, even though this was challenging the authority of the Ottoman Sultan. Because the Ottoman Sultan is Khalif, and Khalif is Mashiach. Khalif means Mashiach. So there is a Khalif. There is the God's representative on earth. Okay? In any case, at one certain point, in 1666, the Turks become pissed off with him. The Sultan, he's invited by the Kübrili, Ahmed Kübrili Wazir, to the High Court, and the Sultan offers him graciously to either convert to Islam or separate his head from the rest of his body. And then Shabtai Tzvi converts. Okay, he converts, but he doesn't really convert wholeheartedly.
He's a converso.
Yes, he is really a converso, just like those Jews in Spain who were forcefully converted to Islam. But what's happening is that Christianity, sorry. But what's happening is that after he passed away 3 years later, the last 3 years he was in Ulci, so it's 10 years later, he passes away. And many of his Ma'aminim, just like the Chabad Hasidim, are shocked. They can't believe he passed away. So they say he didn't really pass away. He was taken, but he will return. And then there is a major quarrel within the Jewish community between the most fervent Chabadnikim of the time and the rest of the community. And then the community is somehow like pushing them outside. So these people, and now this is not a converso, because they do it on their own initiative. They go and they convert to Islam. Okay? To Islam. Few hundred Jewish households, few decades after Shabtai's conversion, willingly convert to Islam. But why? Because of this credo qua absurdum, Augustinus, right? So, if you believe in something logical, then you are not a believer. 2 and 2 are 4. You don't believe that. That's a fact. But if you need to do something extremely unbelievable because you are a believer, oh, that shows how great a believer you are. So they say the greatest believers are those who will follow him in his apostasy, because this apostasy was a cosmic divine plan to restitute the sparks of holiness in Ishmael. There is such a concept in Kabbalah, sparks of holiness, and he is now metaken kelipat Ishmael. Now, just to make a long story short, because we need to finish. But what happens is, soon enough, I mean, these people are Jewish. Soon enough, they divide into 3 groups who don't intermarry. Now, it doesn't matter that they are Jews are minority and they are minority of minority. The minority splits into 3 groups. How do they split? The last Shabtai's wife had a brother called Yaakov. And when he converted to Islam, he was called Yaqub. And this Yaqub Effendi, Shabtai's widow, spent 3 days close with her brother in the room. Then she came out and she said that Shabtai's soul was incorporated into him. And then all those Shabbatai believers who followed him, they are called Yaqubis. But then huge group amongst the people said, come on, he's your brother. Obviously you would say such a thing. Okay, then they recognized they need their own horse for the competition. So they said, we have a proof that it could be Yaakov, because Shabtai's soul actually transmigrated into Berachia Russo, another guy. So this guy, all of them have double names. So his Turkish name was Osman Baba, and his Hebrew name, his Jewish name, was Berachia Russo. So this group, which didn't believe that Shabtai Tzvi's soul transmigrated into Yaakov, they were called Karakash, the black, how do you call this part of it? Eyebrows. Yeah, the black eyebrows. That's their official name of the group. Okay? Now, Berachia Russo dies without delivering the salvation. They were all hoping for salvation. That's why they did such a hideous act as to convert to another law, just to hasten the Geulah, right? Okay, and then Berachia Russo dies. And now the community of Karakash is bewildered. They don't know what to do. So they start saying, well, he will return, or Shabtai Tzvi, the soul of Shabtai Tzvi, who left Berachia Russo, will return, and so on. One of them gets up and says, if he was really the body in which the soul of Mashiach lived, his body cannot decompose. Now this shows that they live in Eastern Roman Empire, the Orthodox Christian tradition, which believes in remnants of the saints. Okay, so they open the grave, and unfortunately the grave stinks. Great. So all those people who had Nazareth, how do you say Nazareth?
Cold.
Yeah, all people who were called or didn't want to believe that he's Isriach, how do you say Isriach? Yeah, that he's tank. So all those people who couldn't feel or wouldn't believe that he's tank proceeded believing that he was. And those who said, come on, the guy stinks, they became third community called Kapanji. Now each of these 3 communities has its own neighborhoods in Salonika. Now imagine, Salonika is the city, there is a saying which says, en Salonika, tanto los malachim hablan español. Right? In Saloniki, and now nobody knows to which malachim they refer, to the angels or to the marineros, to the sailors? We don't know, because according to Sephardic pronunciation, the Malachim and the Malachim are the same thing. So it might be that angels in Salonika speak Spanish. It might be that the sailors, but that was the only port in the world closed on Shabbat. Because most of the workers in the port were Jewish, just like the most of anything. The most of anything, the most of harlots, the most of whores, sorry for my English, in Salonika were Jewish. So it can. The idea is in all other cities, but in most other cities, Jews were a tiny minority filling a lacuna. So they were typical Jewish professions. Salonika being the fact that in different centuries, different amounts of majority were Jewish. 60%, 70%, 80% some at the peak. So the entire city is Jewish. That means that Jews cannot deal with typical Jewish professions. Jews are basically running the city. So the city is closed when Jews don't work. It's crazy. Yeah, it's great. So the Jews of Volos were a Greek-speaking community. That's why they had good relations with the surrounding Greek population. That's why their rabbi was recognized as spiritual leader by Christians also. That's why he could slap the guy on the street because his wife complained to the rabbi. Christian guy, can you imagine? Now, Jews of Salonika couldn't even have such good relations with Greeks because Salonika was not a Greek city. Sorry. Salonika was an Ottoman city with overwhelming Jewish majority. And then, even the non-Jewish minority was not Greek. It was everything. It was Turks, then Muslim Jews, Jewish Muslims, then Albanians, Bulgarians, Serbs, everything. So Jews believed, when Macedonia started decomposing, Jews believed, and they pressed international community to give Salonika status of Republika Judea, of Jewish republic, of autonomy in the Balkans that would actually be a Jewish state. First Balkan War, 1912, 1913. This didn't happen, and by the end of the First Balkan War, the Greek enter Salonika. So Salonika becomes Greek in 1912. And Jews of Salonika are exterminated only 30 years later. So they didn't even have enough time to become Greek. You follow? Now, when the exchange of populations between Turkey and Greece took place, right? The Christians, the Greeks from Izmir and from entire Asia Minor were expelled to Greece. And many of them came to Salonika. And at the same time, Turks were expelled from Salonika. And with the Turks, also the Jewish Muslims. Yeah, so the Dolmen went from Salonika to Turkey, right? So Salonika, at the moment when Germans entered, was not an organic community in which people knew each other, cared about each other, loved each other. Most of the Christians in the city were also newcomers, right? The Greek sovereignty over the city was totally new. It's 30 years, it's nothing. So the Jews were not helped by anybody. These were hostile populations. It was very easy in a Romaniotes community to appeal to Greeks. They speak the same language. They are, right? But the Salonican Jews are not 1,000 Jews who are to be saved by 150,000 Greek neighbors. They are 60,000 Jews, right? Who are supposed to be saved by whom? By 30 or 40 or whatever, 70,000 Christian immigrants who don't know them, who don't speak the same language. So it's a very complicated issue and very complicated situation. The problem is that we all today think in terms of national states. So we understand that Greek, we actually take the modern reality that we know and we transplant it to the past. So we believe that that Greece is Greek. No, Greece wasn't Greek. Salonika was not a Greek city. Salonika was a Jewish city. The Socialist Party in Salonika had a newspaper printed in Judeo-Spanish, because that was the language that everybody in Salonika, if you were to print it in Turkish, 10%, 20%, 30%, depends at the time, of the population would know it. If you print it in Bulgarian, 5%. If you print it in Serbian, 2%. But if you print it in Judeo-Spanish, everybody knows. Everybody can follow it. So, okay, so now we know that Salonika, and with this I'm finishing, but now we know that Salonika actually became the center of Jewish life for the entire Ottoman Empire. Certainly for the Ladino-speaking Jews of non-Kurdish part of the empire, or not Oriental part of the empire, right? Starting with Turkish Kurdistan, another different Jewish culture starts, right? But from Diyarbakir upper, let me put it that way roughly, it's all one Ottoman Sephardic Jewish culture with one capital, Salonika. And for subsequent 3 centuries, Salonika was actually exporting rabbis to all other communities all over the Balkans. So not only all over the Balkans, to Amsterdam. And Amsterdam was usually run by Salonican exportees. The rabbis which were exported from Salonika. Salonika was so Jewish that there were times where there were 40 different Jewish communities. 40 different Jewish communities. Now, this means established communities with a public independent building. Nobody counted the peak, how many private synagogues in the houses were. Shibla, right? It was a very Jewish city. Now what happened, and this is my last sentence. In 1912, the Greeks occupied the city. In 1917, there is a huge fire in Salonika. And the fire destroys the entire Ottoman city. And this gives opportunity to the Greek government to reshape Salonika as a Hellenic, as a Greek city. So they expropriate the old city and they rebuild. Why? Because previously, before the Great Fire of 1917, the heart of the city was Jewish. The Jewish neighborhoods were, central Manhattan, right? And then the Christians the Christians lived in the Upper West Side, the Turks lived in the Upper West Sides, and the Christians lived in the Lower East Side. But the Jews lived in many neighborhoods in the middle of the city. And then the Jewish neighborhoods had a border with Muslim Jewish neighborhoods. There was a Karakash neighborhood, there was a Yaqubi neighborhood, there were few Yaqubi neighborhoods, there were few Karakash neighborhoods, and there were few Kapanji neighborhoods. These are only 3 Muslim Jewish groups, right? So the city was very, very Jewish. And then the Yaqubis built a mosque, a new mosque called Yeni Jami. And when you look to the mosque, it looks just like any ordinary Ashkenazi or Sephardic synagogue in Eastern Europe or Southern Europe at the moment. This is the period of, and we spoke about this in Sarajevo, this is the period of pseudo-Moorish fever. And the Ashkenazim started building synagogues like the Dohani synagogue in Budapest, and the synagogue in the Central Park, which is a replica, and so on and so on. Like the synagogue in Berlin, like the synagogue in Oranienstraße in Berlin, and so on. All these synagogues are built in a very Moorish way, right? Now, the Yaqubis are supposed to build a mosque. And this should be a normal Balkan mosque. But they built a pseudo-Moorish building with billion Magen David all over it. And you will go to Salonika and you will see all of this. And if it wasn't there, it would be hard to believe that these people could get out of the closet and at a certain point, and they could build a mosque which tells everybody we are Jewish. Okay, so we'll be there and you will see that. Thank you.
Okay.
It's wonderful. Thank you. That was wonderful.
Thank
It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
So Ladino was not spoken anymore today anymore.
Well, there are 200,000 speakers today, but they are dying out slowly.
That's what I'm saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Like,
Nobody transfers it.
like Latin.
Yeah.
Latin.
So when did Istanbul become more important for Jews?
Never.
So where do we get this idea that Istanbul is more than Thessaloniki?
I don't know.
Misinformation.
Misinformation. The chief rabbi of the Ottoman Empire sat in Istanbul, but nobody cared what he says. The same way nobody cares about what the chief rabbi of Israel says. Because he's established by the state. The Jews say, well, what does the state knows about Judaism?
Thank you very much.
You are more than welcome.